The Toronto Blue Jays are in desperate need of some wins right now, and yesterday's loss didn't help. They're now 3.5 games back of that final wild card spot, and the Angels just made some things very, very interesting. They just dropped a lot of players. They're dropping like flies, and they've thrown in the towel. They've gotten rid of a lot of valuable players, and they're going to be on the market, and they're going to be available to the Jays. So we'll break down the importance of acquiring at least one of these guys and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. And as it stands right now, at the time of recording, the Toronto Blue Jays are 3.5 games back of the Houston Astros, of the Texas Rangers, and now 4.5 back of the Seattle Mariners for that final wild card spot. I think the Mariners are a little bit too far gone now for the Toronto Blue Jays, but 3.5 games with about 30 games left to go in the season is a really steep hill to climb, Nick. And the Angels made things very interesting yesterday. A lot of these players are going to be available to the Toronto Blue Jays, and we'll explain that further on in this video. But the Jays need some help right now because they've been churning out some lineups that just are not major league caliber right now.
Yeah, yesterday's game, we thought maybe in the bottom of the ninth there they could have walked it off, but in Jays fashion, they took a pretty rough loss. Before we break down this crazy Angels news, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and this is the last day of my vacation, so the setup will be back to normal starting tomorrow. So let's just get right into the first topic here. And Peter, the Angels, they just did something that we didn't expect. Now, during the trade deadline, we were a bit surprised that they were buyers because, Shohei Ohtani, they wanted to keep Shohei Ohtani. That was the ultimate goal, and they ultimately decided to just put a bunch of their players on waivers, some of which, including Matt Moore, are really elite players and very, very good. What are your initial thoughts on the craziness that the Los Angeles Angels have placed starters Lucas Giolito, Matt Moore, Ronaldo Lopez, Hunter Renfroe, and Randal Grichuk on waivers, so any team can get them and be used in the playoffs? It's just absolute madness. We haven't seen this. I haven't seen this in my lifetime, but what a colossal disaster for the Angels. But maybe in a time where the Jays are riddled with injuries, now is the time for them to maybe pick up someone like Hunter Renfroe or Randal Grichuk.
Yeah, I mean, Renfroe is definitely the one that I'm circling if I'm the Toronto Blue Jays. There's going to be a lot of suitors for him, though, because he's got playoff experience. He's someone that, has extreme power, someone that can play the corner outfields at a pretty decent level defensively. But this reminds me of like that dude in fantasy baseball that is just pissed off that he didn't make the playoffs, and he just drops all of his players, and then it's a free-for-all of all the teams that are in playoff contention trying to get all of these guys. P.S. Don't be that guy in fantasy baseball, okay? Don't be that guy. But that's what this reminds me of, and it's shocking. I mean, the Angels went all in and then they fell flat on their faces. Shohei Ohtani is most definitely going to leave that organization now, and you got to feel bad for them. They tried their best. They've been riddled with injuries. Taylor Ward broke his face. It just keeps getting worse and worse for this franchise. And I do wish their fans all the best because this has got to be a roller coaster of emotions that they're going through right now. But when it concerns the Blue Jays, when you look at Hunter Renfroe, Randal Grichuk, I'm not too high on Grichuk. He is having a decent season, but he's not someone that would definitely move the needle for the Toronto Blue Jays. But you look at Renfroe, he's got 18 home runs on the season. That would be second best on the team behind Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and he would pretty much play every day. You'd find a place to put this guy in the lineup. He's not having the greatest of seasons last year, but you look at his StatCast from 2022, it's a lot better. You could see he's got a cannon for an arm. He's got very good exit velocities, and a bit of a down year this year, but the Angels, all in all, have just been horrible, and it's hard to stay motivated when you're in that kind of situation. But Nick, this is the guy that I'm really circling if I'm the Toronto Blue Jays, and there's going to be a lot of suitors for him, and I want you to explain that to the people here.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in a second. But like you said, Hunter Renfroe, he's a great player. I feel like the Jays were linked to him a few years ago. He has an absolute cannon of an arm, and like you said, he's the guy as well that I think would be the most likely, probably, for the Jays to pursue, and ultimately would be a guy that I think the Jays hopefully would have a chance for. And let's go over how the kind of order of this works. It changed a few years ago. It used to go based off of location or something like that, but now who gets the players will be determined by reverse order of the record. The team with the worst record that puts in a claim on a player that will receive him. And there are going to be plenty of claims put in from playoff caliber teams that need a starter, bullpen help, and bats. And for the Blue Jays in particular, we're probably looking at the bats. Obviously, we have Genesis Cabrera and Tim Mayza as our lefties. I don't think we have any room at all in our bullpen for Matt Moore. I think Hunter Renfroe could fit in. Like you said, we need power. Power would work perfectly. And then, of course, this is the other part of it from Clark here saying, I'm unrealistically contending teams. The only clubs with worse records than the Blue Jays, and therefore ahead of them in the waiver wire order, are the Twins and maybe the Cubs and Diamondbacks. So if they want one of these guys, they should have a shot at them. And this is the key tweet here. And this is what kind of changes everything for the Blue Jays. Their record, I guess, in the one time of the season where having a bit of a worse record than the others benefits them. They will have a chance, hopefully, to get ahead of some of these guys. Now that could all change if one of the bottom teams that for no reason just decides to claim one of these guys, which wouldn't make very much sense. But we should have a decent shot at Hunter Renfroe if we go for him. And according to Ben Nicholson-Smith, for the Blue Jays, Grichuk or Renfroe would be a fit. Jays were in on right-handed bats at the deadline, and they checked in on Grichuk, and they're seemingly good for pitching, so probably not going to go for anything there. So lots of reports circulating, specifically around Hunter Renfroe, Randal, Grichuk, and if we want to get them, we should have a pretty good shot at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at Hunter Renfroe, you look at those teams that were mentioned over there by Gideon Clark, and you could basically rule out the Diamondbacks because they just acquired Tommy Pham at the deadline. He's been playing well for them, so I don't think there's a fit there. The Cubs are kind of in limbo. They're in the wild card race, but they didn't decide to sell at the deadline, so they're an interesting name when it comes to Hunter Renfroe as well. And then the other team, the Boston Red Sox aren't being mentioned here, but I'm sure they're going to be in on them. So I guess if you're the Jays, you got to go for Grichuk and Hunter Renfroe here, just because you might not get Renfroe. There's going to be more suitors for him, but Grichuk is not a bad backup option. I just don't know where he fits on this current Jays roster. Whereas if it was to be Renfroe, you basically do find a spot for him because he's that kind of player, and he is someone that could help this Blue Jays lineup that is really struggling right now without Matt Chapman, without Bo Bichette, without a lot of other guys, a lot of regulars. So shout out to Davis Schneider as well, really holding it down in the middle of that lineup. But this Blue Jays team does need some help, and the sense of urgency is really starting to kick in now because there's only 30 games remaining. You're 3.5 games back. This is going to be really tough for them. They've had their chances, Nick. We've reiterated this in multiple videos that they've had chances to pull away from other teams in the wild card race. They just haven't been able to string wins together. And now when they hit a bit of a cold patch, the other teams start to win. And that's what the Blue Jays should have been doing all season long. They had that cushion. They had the players healthy to do it. And now they're not healthy, and now they're not playing good baseball. So it's a bad mix when you're entering the stretch run.
Yeah, and we had, like you said, we've been talking about this on videos. We should have made some gap. Ben Nicholson-Smith talked about it yesterday. We had our chance to separate ourselves from the other teams. But one other thing to note here, I'll just bring up Hunter Renfroe's stats here. Brandon Belt yesterday was going to come in to pinch hit, but he had back spasms. So if he happens to go in the IL, we're unaware of the severity of that injury. It's not known to be super serious, but even a guy like Renfroe would replace some of his power. He had a 31 home run year, 29 home run year, and 18 home runs this year. So even in a down year, he's still providing power. And just as recently as last year, he had an 800 plus OPS. So if Brandon Belt's injury lingers at all, I think they put in a claim anyway, but it could make even more sense to get a guy like Renfroe. Now, they're not that similar hitters, Belt and Renfroe, but at least Renfroe would provide some power that Belt has been providing the Blue Jays this year. And I don't know, it's just some crazy stuff going on. And this is Lucas Giolito's stats for anyone curious as well. I know we're probably not going to be going for the pitchers, but this kind of just shows that the Angels, they traded and they went all in at the deadline. Lucas Giolito was the most prized starter on the trade block this year, which kind of goes to show how underwhelming the deadline was. But it didn't work for them at all. They tried to keep Ohtani. Maybe they have a shot at keeping Ohtani. I'd say it's pretty unlikely at this point. But I don't know, Peter. Any final thoughts on this craziness before we wrap up and hope the Jays get a win this afternoon?
I'm just wondering if Hunter Renfroe can play any bit of shortstop. I mean, that's the Blue Jays' need right now. So I don't know where he fits. If Brandon Belt has to go in the IL, then I don't know how I feel about the outlook of the rest of the season. It doesn't look too great. He's been probably the best hitter on the Jays apart from Bo Bichette. So I don't know. It's not encouraging, and we got to hang in there. We got to hang around for this stretch run because we love this team and we love everything about them. But sometimes they do make us crazy. But stick around. It's going to be interesting to see how the stretch run plays out. But go Jays. I mean, they've got to start winning some games here.
Yeah, and hopefully they can get one of these guys and maybe make some final push in September. But that'll wrap up the video. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.